Gary Hall is a 5-time Olympic medalist, world record holder, and famous for bringing a little bit of flair to the sport of swimming. Well known in the sport as the Godfather of Swimming due to his showmanship when entering the pool deck, emulating boxers and fighters from before him. But behind the scenes, Gary is far from the person he displayed on the pool deck, sharing his struggles with fame and dealing with the spotlight. In this episode of the Athletes Only podcast, we discuss the overwhelming presence of doping in the sport of swimming, Gary's rivalry with legendary Russian sprinter and world record holder Alexander Popov, to the Australian swim team during the 2000 Sydney Olympics, and much more. Without further ado, here's today's guest, Gary Hall Jr. Thank you, Gary, so much for taking the time to chat with me today.
Hey, thanks for having me.
I want to dive right into it today. We got the Paris Olympics on the horizon here, and I thought it would be important to speak with an Olympic sprinting legend like yourself. And, I guess just to kind of rewind a little bit and start from the beginning, I would love to understand a little bit more about your background and how you got into the sport of swimming.
I was born into a swimming family. Both my parents were swimmers. They met at a swim meet. My dad was a successful swimmer. He had 10 world records, World Swimmer of the Year twice, 3 Olympic Games, medaled in all 3 Olympic Games, 2 silvers and a bronze. My maternal uncle was on the 76 team with my father. My maternal grandfather was one of the best swimmers in the world after World War II. He was in the Navy. Growing up, swimming was just something that we did.
Growing up in a swimming household, Gary was constantly surrounded by swimming greatness. But rather than follow in his father's footsteps and attend Indiana University, Gary chose to take a different path and swam at the University of Texas under legendary swim coach Eddie Reese. However, Gary's career at UT Austin wouldn't last that long.
Yeah, I'm going to start the answer to that question with an expression of respect and admiration for Eddie Reese. He is inarguably one of the greatest coaches that the sport has ever seen. I knew after 3 months of being in Texas that I had made a terrible mistake, and it wasn't the right program for me. And that was audacious for an unproven kid, freshman in college, to say, I know more about what I need. I'm not a better coach than you, but I know what I need, and this isn't it. So it was really tough going to him and letting him know that I was transferring out. And I did that before the summer. I qualified for the World Championships and ended up doing really well. I got second place behind Alex Popov, the world record holder and reigning Olympic champion. So some might argue that, Texas might have had something to do with that, right? But I knew that there was a path that needed to be explored, and I was bold enough to abandon a full ride scholarship at the University of Texas, swimming for one of the world's greatest swim coaches, to explore that.
While many swimmers are quite friendly and tend to portray a very humble background, Gary chose to take an alternative path to spice things up and create a name for himself in the sport of swimming. As the young star on Team USA, swimmers from all over the globe began to put a target on Gary's back, but he didn't shy away from it at all, including going toe-to-toe with then world record holder in the 100 freestyle, Alexander Popov. Additionally, he's famously quoted as saying, "We'll smash them like guitars," in reference to the Australian swim team ahead of the 2000 Sydney Olympics. However, Hall shares another side to the story, one that the media never covered, and also shares his true motives behind his showmanship on the pool deck.
Yeah, I think that it was a different time. That in the 1980s and even into the 1990s, you had in boxing, the greatest promoter was Don King, an eccentric, inarguably a lunatic on some accounts.
Sure.
You had Vince McMahon with wrestling, and the ratings for wrestling at the time were outperforming like major professional sports.
Yeah.
And so, that was less the athleticism and more the staged rivalries and all the like things and the face off before the fights and it trash talking was part of it. And then even in the NBA, the Pistons, those were bad boys, right? Like they were stirring it up out on the court, and people love that. In hockey, they don't have fights anymore. There was all fights back then. Right? So it was about the rivalry, about the conflict. Yeah, button down Midwesterners like Larry Bird, who were just straight up shit talkers. Like the court, they were nonstop. Just and to me, growing up in that, I thought, oh, this is just the way you play the game. Like it wasn't a conscientious thing. Like, oh, I'm going to create these rivalries. It's going to be good for the sport or anything like that. I was just out there having fun with it. And, trash talking the same way in practice for the main set that I was,
Sure.
Or whatever. There wasn't anything hostile. There wasn't anything unsportsman about it. It was just that was what sport was. And that's changed. And it's boring without it. I miss the fights.
Sure.
I miss the trash talk. I miss the, Lakers. Rivalries and all the stuff that came out of that time, but I found one and I didn't seek it out with Alex Popov, and I'd say I'm going to give him credit for initiating it. The first time I met him, it was right away. This is the guy to beat, and he recognized in me that I was the one to watch as a potential threat, and so We had, very few exchanges, and there was a language barrier too between us, right? Like he did speak English. I don't speak any Russian. But even despite the language barrier, we still managed to get in some, trash talk. I wrote such a flattering article about Australian swimming. I was blogging for CNN Sports Illustrated in the lead up to the 2000 Olympic Games. And when I sent that article, and I hit the send button, I thought I was going to get in trouble. Not in my wildest imagination did I think it would be from the Australians. I thought I was going to get in trouble from USA Swimming because it was really an article saying that we should be emulating Australian and that they're the ones to watch. They're the ones to beat. If they continue down this path, they're going to be the best in the world. And here they've accomplished it, quite a few years later. But nobody could argue that, what they were doing at the time wasn't working. But, there's a nationalism, a natural bias that we have to have as members of Team USA. And so there was a throwaway line saying, if I can wish them well without them stepping on our heads in the process, I do. I hope they succeed. And, in my biased opinion, I think that we'll smash them like a guitar. But something in the remote area, a logic area of my brain says it's not going to be so easy this time. It wasn't even a sentence. It was half of a sentence. And if it had been included in the context of the previous paragraphs, and paragraphs after, nobody could, in their right mind, could accuse me of being arrogant and cocky and a loudmouth American and all the things that I was portrayed to be by the Australian media. It really hurt. I was really, really, really hurt by that.
I'm sure they were looking for, any sort of, locker material that they could at that point, because like you said, they had done a great job in the lead up to those Olympics. They had a very impressive team, but again, you guys were definitely the favorite. And I think like that great little rivalry that you did create, I think it was good for the sport overall, personally. And like you said, I read the article in the lead up for this interview, definitely out of context, but nonetheless,
Yeah, inarguably, that incident elevated the sport in terms of athletic performance and also in public awareness and public interest. Nobody can argue that. So whether it was intentional or not, I think it was good for the sport. I think that, this many years later now, quarter century later, they're still harping on it. Like, they're like, this is it. This is the big rivalry. And I'm being credited with starting it. And I don't deserve that. That's too much credit. But I certainly, that relay and that exchange and that incident, could definitely be considered a cornerstone of what that rivalry is based upon.
Earlier this year, it came out that the World Anti-Doping Agency, or WADA, allowed 23 Chinese swimmers to compete at the 2021 Tokyo Olympics, despite failing a drug test for a compound called TMZ. Many swimmers were absolutely enraged, including Olympians Katie Ledecky, Cody Miller, and Adam Peaty, calling for more oversight of WADA and a cleaner sport. But before Katie Ledecky and Adam Peaty, there was Gary Hall calling for more testing, even if it meant at the expense of his own Team USA teammates.
My introduction to the international circuit was World Championships in 1994 in Rome. And the Chinese women won almost every single event except for the women's 200 freestyle. Every single event. And they were even taking 2 medals, and a lot of them, the top 2. It was a blowout. And I had never seen international swimming before. And a Chinese woman got up out of the warm-up pool, about to race, and she jumps up out of the pool and squares up to where I was, waiting to jump in. And she was just so, I got stronger later in my career. I wasn't weak at that point, and she just could have bludgeoned me to death with her cap and goggles. And it was just unnatural. It was unnatural. And I've been around top level. I trained with Olympians, from the age of 13, 14 years old on. So I'd seen what Olympic athletes look like. And there was something clearly wrong in the fact that they were just blowing everybody else out of the water. The 98 World Championships, it wasn't the anti-doping agency that found and confiscated something enough human growth hormone to fuel a North Korean army. It was and it was stuffed into a teddy bear. So I knew all along there was systematic doping going on in China and other countries. As I came to find out later on in my career, and was very outspoken about it, questioned why Amy Van Dyken was called to testify in the Balco hearings. And so that was like a betrayal, I think, for a lot of people within USA Swimming, that I was saying, hey, we've got to clean up our own house too, because there's a couple people out there that everybody kind of whispers but they're on our team. So what do we do? Where's the loyalty? The sport will never get clean unless the athletes start turning in their teammates and the coaches that are introducing them to these substances.
Yeah.
It can only be regulated internally. And I like Travis Tygart. He's, I think, noble effort. He believes in the cause. With his resources, he's ineffective. USA Anti-Doping Agency. WADA is as corrupt as World Aquatics. It's like FIFA. If there's money, it's good. And China has certainly, provided a lot of support through the years. And so we need to examine why 20-some athletes that tested positive for doping were able to compete in the last Olympic Games. And it's not wrong for somebody to stand up and say that. We don't expect perfect. There will always be somebody that can slip through the cracks. But when it's just so blatant, and it's gone on for so long. I mean, I swam a long time ago. 94 World Championships was a long time ago. China never cleaned up their act. They've
30 years later.
And so is the Russian. So is the Russian Federation. And we know it. And it seems like the anti-doping agencies and World Aquatics have dragged their feet and have only responded to outcry from around the world to even address it. as a conversation topic, let alone inflict, punishment. Yes, I was banned from the sport for smoking marijuana in 1998. It also came on the heels of me calling for a union and professionalizing the sport and doing a lot of activities. So it's a politically motivated organization that isn't above using, tactics. If you steal $1,000, you go to jail. But if you rob an athlete of a gold medal, there's no consequence. It's a huge disservice to the sport and the next generation of athletes.
For most swimmers, hard practices are measured by the distance swum and not the energy exerted by the athlete. While sports like track and field have much different training routines for their sprinters versus their marathon runners, many swim coaches still put all swimmers through the exact same practice, with only small variations. Frustrated with the style of coaching and the lack of support from other world-renowned swim coaches, Gary founded the Race Club, an elite group of swimmers focused on one thing: fast swimming.
I founded the Race Club with David Arluck, fitter, faster guy. And that was back in 2003. And we had a core group of elite level athletes because I had left the collegiate system after my freshman year. So I was an outsider right away. So I wasn't able to train with the collegiate team. So I had to assemble like my own crew. And so we brought, and most of them were international athletes. And so it was incredible. It's the belief that all ships would rise with the tide, but I wanted to practice racing. Simple enough concept. That sounds simple, but it's not what was being done at the time. It was a measurement of how good your workout was distance. How far did you go? Like that was the only parameter of whether it was a tough workout or whether it was an easy workout, was the number of yards or meters that you swam. And I didn't believe that was right. And I remember my sophomore year in high school arguing with my coach on the pool deck before morning workout, trying to get a 5-minute delay of getting in. But in track and field, the sprinter and the cross-country runner, they don't train the same. They don't look the same, a totally different build. And look at how extremely different their training is. But here, it doesn't matter if you swim the 400 IM or the mile or open water or the 50 free or the 200 butterfly or the 100 breaststroke. Everybody does the same training, pretty much. And so I set out, that was what I needed to pursue. And now, Michael Andrew can try to brand it and say that he created it or whatever. But he wasn't the first. I wasn't the first either. There was a small group of us, and we found each other in the sport. We know who each other were, the people that were pioneering this new training that now Caleb Dressel has benefited from. Everybody it's on the shoulders of the previous generation. So I'm only a step in the ladder, right? Of how we were able to, a very small group of us, and there were certain coaches like Dave Marsh, Mike Bottom, and Dave Salo, who were really pioneering coaches too, that were, recognized that this was a better way, and were pioneering this field of race specific work, right? And so in bringing together, we had in the 2004 Olympics 5 out of the 8 finalists in the 50-meter freestyle as a member of the Race Club. 5 out of the 8 finalists. There's no country that a country can only put 2, in a finals. We had 5 out of the 8. I don't think any team coach has been able to match that. We were doing something right, and that was racing and getting up on the blocks and doing the racing stuff. And some of the closest races, toughest races, were in practice. And that made us all better. That made us all better, and helped inform the next generation of swimmers that there's something here.
With the 2024 Paris Olympics only weeks away and the 50 and 100 freestyle being absolutely loaded with talent, I had to ask Gary before I let him go, which swimmer reminds him most of himself.
We just recently had the 2024 Olympic trials. We had swimmers like Caleb Dressel go repeat on the Olympic team. We had young swimmers, startups. My college teammate, Jack Alexi, make the U.S. Olympic team. And then like around the world, you have other swimmers like David Popovici, very young, small guy from Romania. Then you have, older startups like Kyle Chalmers from Australia. A lot of great sprinters out there. That 100 freestyle and 50 freestyle this summer are going to be fast, and I'm excited to watch it. But yeah, as you look at like the day of modern swimming, I guess to wrap things up here, like who reminds you most of yourself and why?
Oh God, I would never ever consider that question. That's ego. That's ego. I don't have it. I'm not cheering for somebody that's trying to emulate me. I'm cheering for the badass. That's who I want to win. And maybe what you were talking about, like, and growing up in a less politically correct time. Let's reinstate the badasses. And that's that. Yeah, I don't even care at this point. Obviously, I want USA to win. But I'm looking for the brave one, the one that doesn't step down, that isn't shaken at all by the immense, incomprehensible pressure that the Olympic stage inflicts.
Thanks so much for watching episode 13 of the Athletes Only podcast featuring Gary Hall. If you want to get access to my full, unedited interview with Gary, make sure to become a member of my channel and subscribe so you don't miss out on any great interviews just like this one. I appreciate the continued support on the channel. It means so much. So if you guys want to see more Olympic swimming content, make sure to subscribe because we got so much planned for this summer. So with that said, I'll see you all next week.